All right. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Hutchinson County Podcast. Today is March the 27th, 2025. My guest today is Bob Edmiaston, candidate for Borger City Council, Place 4. Bob, welcome to the Hutchinson County Podcast.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, we'll start with some questions here tonight. The first subject will be general background and motivation. What inspired you to run for Borger City Council?
Oh, my background, I was born in Hobbs, New Mexico, and spent most of my school years in Odessa, Texas. And how I ended up in Borger, a friend of mine I worked with many years ago moved up here, so I stopped by to visit him. And this was back in 1972, and Borger was pretty well booming. I had no intentions of staying in Borger. Like I said, I was just passing through, but about the second day I was here, I was offered a job with a pole line construction crew or building power lines, mostly the new wells, compressor stations, stuff like that. And later on, I was an electrician in Phillips in 2003.
Okay, question number 2. What do you believe are the most pressing issues currently facing Borger, and how do you plan to address them?
Oh, there's so many issues facing Borger right now. You know, the economy and uncertainty, and I think one that really stands out most, in my opinion, is that Borger's trying to get too big too fast.
Maybe that athletic facility we're talking about? Maybe.
Well, I'm not going to really
Yeah, I'm not
say
privy.
anything. It's like I said, that's still kind of a hot subject.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
I said, somebody asked me about it 2 days ago. We were out in that area, and I just said, when they start breaking work and pouring concrete, I'll
Yeah.
actually believe it's happening.
Well, I think they're pretty optimistic, but you know, there's nothing wrong with being optimistic. But I think they
No.
need to be a little bit more realistic, you know, and get your head out of the clouds and keep your feet on the ground.
I mean, you'd have to wonder why they passed up Amarillo for something like that, a
Yeah.
bigger city. So we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay.
And what experience or skills do you have to make you qualified to serve on the city council?
I guess I'm like the biggest majority of people in Borger. I'm kind of a blue collar worker. I'm electrician by trade. I've been a licensed master electrician for 50 plus years, and I can pretty well relate to the working people in Borger. I mean, you know, I work with them, I work beside them, and I can pretty well understand, you know, where they're coming from and what their concerns are. I guess you could say I walk a mile in their shoes.
Totally understand that. So next question can you share an example of a time when you demonstrated leadership in your community?
I've served on several boards, Borger boards, you know, like planning and zoning, and well, that's been quite a few years ago. And of course, you know, working shift work and stuff like that, it was kind of one of those deals, you know, I just couldn't do it.
Okay, we will go to the next subject, city budget and finance. How would you prioritize city spending if elected to the city council?
I think we need to concentrate more on our needs and less on our wants.
Okay, let's see. The next question. Borger, like many cities, has to balance its budget. How would you approach making tough financial decisions to ensure that essential services are maintained?
Yeah, I pretty well keep an eye on financial reports, you know, during monthly reports and stuff like that. And it's a good indication that, you know, more or less, I guess, where we're headed. Of course, that changes from month to month, you know, but it'll kind of give you a trend as whether we're going up or down, but like I said, that changes every month.
Let's see. What strategies would you propose to promote economic development and job creation in Borger?
Yeah. I guess on the BEDC, I'd have to say they got a pretty tough job. It's going to be kind of hard to get a big company in, you know, and of course smaller companies, you know, they kind of come and go, but it'd be pretty tough, you know, and they've had several, I guess like I say, ideals or prospects, but none of them really come about.
Totally understand that. We'll go with our next subject here tonight: infrastructure and development. What improvements or changes would you propose for Borger's infrastructure, roads, public transportation, water supply?
I guess the thing that stands out the most when you mention infrastructure would be the streets. And like I said, the streets, of course, I don't need to tell anybody that, they're in pretty bad shape. But they didn't get that way overnight, and it's not going to be fixed, overnight. It's going to take a lot of time and money. I think if they would have earmarked money for the streets instead of some of their, I'd say pet projects, but right now, it's going to cost a lot more, and the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost.
Yeah, I'd say maybe like an overhaul of the clover leaf or something. So
Yeah,
maybe beautify. I mean,
yeah,
the state, I know that's state highway and state maintenance, but I'd like to see redo some of the bridges and look like Amarillo, not the
yeah.
chaos, but the pretty designs, and have the star and some of the pretty designs they have on the
But to
along
be
the
fair,
bridge.
they are working on the streets a little bit. Of course, they're just so bad. Of course, my street out here, sometimes you got to pull over and let somebody pass.
Uh,
Either that, or you're going to run off into a pothole. And I think, Garrett mentioned here a meeting or so ago about an overlay that he drove on in Amarillo, which is quite a bit less expensive. And that might be an alternative. I would suggest, they do maybe a 2 block area and a high traffic area and see how it holds up.
Kind of do a test run on
Yeah,
that overlay
more or
that
less,
you're
yeah.
seeing in Amarillo. That would something to try out.
Yeah.
And said every town in America, I'm sure, has some bad
Oh,
roads.
Lord, yes, I'm
And,
sure.
and stuff. I mean, my neighborhood street, it's pretty smooth. It's one lane, but it's been like that since they built the neighborhood in '52.
Yeah.
And then some of the streets around me, might need to tear them down and start over. Kind of, they're rough
Yeah.
enough. You would have to get down to the road base and probably replace the road base and then build it back up.
Yeah.
They just so many repairs. I do know the sewer system there for a while. They were having a lot of issues
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
digging up something. Well, no, actually, it wasn't a sewer. I'm sorry, the water system. A certain street, I know they've had 10 different leaks, and it was only like 2 blocks long.
Yeah.
And on the same street, just about once every 6 to 8 weeks, there was another water leak, another water leak.
They do
That
pretty
happens,
good.
though.
Yeah, they do pretty good on that, considering, the sewer and the water's probably older than I am, and it's subject to leak any time,
Oh, I can tell you, the neighborhood I'm in, the main line is clay, the
Is
12-inch main,
Yeah.
about 9 foot deep. And that one I replaced was actually clay from my house to the street, but the main line looked in pretty good shape, but it was made of clay.
Yeah.
Still, this many years later. So we'll go to the next question. How would you balance the need of the growth and development with preserving the city's character and environment?
I think what we need is I guess a big business or something that's not totally dependent on oil and gas, because when oil and gas goes, so goes the economy. It would have to be something, like I said, that, not totally dependent on oil and gas, but, in a sense it would be. And I guess maybe Jared mentioned something the other day about, some kind of factory or whatever. And if we could get it close enough to a spur, to more or less, I guess, export it out. But we definitely don't need something that's going to put any more emissions in the air or, ruin the groundwater
Maybe
or whatever, yeah.
Amazon warehouse. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you do. No, Amarillo's got that, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah, something that's not. You're refining something, maybe
Yeah,
some kind of small industry that builds parts to something that they are using in the
yeah,
future. Like I really just kind of drawing a blank on it.
yeah,
What that would be, something I didn't think about. Just some industry that's
yeah,
not oil field related, and it would create jobs. That would be something
yeah.
to bring to Borger. Okay, what is your stance on zoning regulations, and do you believe any changes are necessary for the future development of Borger?
Hmm, I really don't have a comment on that. One question that the housing, affordable housings, and the only thing I can think of is something like barndominiums or something like that, or of course it had to be rezoned because if you put it in somebody's neighborhood, they're going to say, not my neighborhood, So
Yeah,
I would think about thinking about that.
don't want a halfway house in their neighborhood
Yeah.
or something like that. Uh, yeah, I think me and Jared, this was a question we talked about, and I'll throw this question at you. What would you like to see where the bird sanctuary used to be there at Uber Park?
Oh, I really hadn't thought about that. I've been reading some of the comments on there, and some of them are pretty good. I mean, I agree with some of them.
I voted for the amphitheater myself. That was
Yeah.
just kind of
That
no,
might,
maybe
yeah,
small ones to the park.
yeah,
Have this. I know we have the aluminum dome and convention center in good shape, and they're drawing some events, but have something a little bit smaller,
hmm
outdoor concert, or
yeah.
not something
Yeah,
big name, but just
they get
something.
people get a lot of use out of Huber Park. I know when my grandchildren come up, or my granddaughter, my youngest, and she's always wanting to go, but they're always so crowded. And the park looks nice. It really looks nice. It looks better now
The
than I can
city,
ever
yeah, give you
remember.
guys the city a shout out. Y'all keep that pretty good
Yeah,
considering how many times it gets vandalized. You
yeah, I
guys
know it
do an
is.
awesome job.
Yeah,
All the parks, I'll tell you, and I
yeah.
think Gary Winks, I'll give him a shout out. He's the head
Oh yeah,
of doing the parks, doing a good job.
yeah,
Gary knows how to run the lawnmower.
yeah. He
So,
does. I usually go walking down at the baseball park down there. I see Gary down there all the time. He's always working.
yeah, takes care of that grass pretty good.
He
Okay, we'll
does.
go to the next subject, community and public services. How can the city council help foster a stronger sense of community, encourage citizens' engagement in local government?
I think on something like that, I'd kind of bouncing around on these, but when, oh, say an individual or a group proposes, you know, something, or more or less, I guess, ask for money, I think the city council, instead of voting on it right then, ought to table it for a couple of weeks, and let the citizens, you know, have their input on it and, express what their concerns are, whether they're good or bad, and give it about 2 weeks and then vote on it, depending on what the majority of citizens feel.
So let's see, well, I was going to remind folks, I know I've said this in all my podcasts, I pulled these questions for political candidates from Chat GBT. Some of them kind of overlap each other and maybe
Yeah.
kind of don't make sense, but we gave the candidates the questions ahead of time, and there's not such a wrong answer, but if they sound kind of weird and overlapping, I'll take that hickey myself on that one. Okay, we'll go with the next one. What steps would you take to ensure that Borger's public safety services, police, fire, etc., are adequately funded and equipped?
Yeah. I think I would have to go with what the candidate at place 5 said, something, about the police department as far as kind of a dedicated drug enforcement group. I realize there's panhandle drug enforcement, but, something local as far as border, because drugs are getting pretty rampant right now, along with crime, which drugs bring crime, and something like that, of course, it would take a few more officers. Well, I say it'd take more officers, but it might be money well spent.
Oh, I think something like that more is better, especially the
Yeah,
police department.
I was going to say something like an undercover operation, but the way the laws are written right now, I don't know whether that would be entrapment or what it would be.
Well, the undercover, in a smaller community like this, they know who the cops are.
Yeah,
I think it works good in Amarillo, a bigger population area. Do some undercover, but it's really hard. I've heard over the years it's hard to turn a lot of information just because everybody knows everybody
yeah,
of the size of the community. I mean, it's something to look at. Or just different ways of policing. Nothing like we've heard the last 4 years, in my opinion, of scaling back the police and bringing in social workers. That's not the answer. transparency with the police department is good, but they're going to have to be hard on some of these areas like they've been. They can't go in there and just try the friendly face at the neighborhood
Yeah.
crack house. I'm sorry, you're going to have to go in there
Yeah.
and
Well,
be a little bit aggressive and not so nice at
Yeah.
times.
You know, they arrest the people that's in possession of drugs. You know, they arrest them time and time again, but till you get to the supplier, I guess, or pusher, whatever, you know, you're really not going to do much good.
And anybody that is in that area, they have to want to help themselves.
Yeah.
You can't force them to go to rehab. They have to want the help. They have to hit rock bottom. Christy Sullivan started meetings for people having them issues, and she was on one of my episodes, and
Yeah.
it has really grown, and she's doing
Yeah.
excellent job on that. That is an option. People, there's a way out if you want to clean. It's a good, and you won't be on the mugshot page on Facebook and get made fun of all the
That's
time.
Yeah, I've been
That
reading-
keeps me nice,
I've been
Bob.
reading some of her stuff on the internet. But you know, it is kind of sickening. Most of these kids I see around here, I call them kids. You know, I remember when they went to school with my kids, and they was good kids that come from a decent family, and it's kind of sickening, you know, to see what they turned out to be. I guess I'm pretty fortunate, you know. I'm old enough. I don't think drugs was really a thing back when I was young. In fact, I never heard of them, you know.
Yeah, and I've actually been down that path and back, so
Yeah.
I speak
Yeah.
from experience. I didn't lose everything. I just woke up one day and I just don't feel very good, and doing this stuff makes me feel worse. And if I don't stop, I'm going to lose everything.
Yeah.
I haven't been arrested. I haven't been in trouble, but I keep down this path. It's going to be.
Yeah.
And I was always told if you get a felony, it's very hard on you, job wise, moving forward in your life.
Yeah.
Glad I was able to pull myself out of that. So we'll go to the next question. How do you view the role of the city in addressing affordable housing needs, and what actions could be taken to address this issue?
Yeah. You know, I was doing some research last week, and there's, I would say, 100 plus empty houses, or not empty houses, but houses for sale in Borger. But they range from 40,000 on up. And talking to one of the city officials, he said the average income in Borger, a household income, was 60,000, and the median income was 80,000, which seems a little high to me. But then again, it's what's considered affordable housing. You know, it depends on the individual. You know, one individual affordable housing for him might not be right for the other one. And
Yeah, if you work at Phillips, you can afford an expensive house. If
Yeah.
you work somewhere else, not so
well,
much.
like I said, you know, of course, that's statistics. I don't put too much into statistics. You know, they just kind of group everybody together and divide them. But I don't think new housing area would be affordable. You know, with the way the economy is today and the cost of material, you know, and stuff like that. I was thinking, the average housing, I would say right offhand, $179 a square foot, and plus, you know, that you add on finance charge, insurance, and stuff like that, you know, and it pretty well stretches you out. So that would take a lot of brain power and a lot of thinking to come up with something like that.
All right, here's our next subject, diversity and inclusion. How would you promote diversity and inclusion within the Borger community? That's a hard question.
I'm not really under-
It's not. It's one of those, like I talked to Jared and then school board members. Basically, we don't see we have to judge somebody by their skin. It's just basically the best person for the job or the
okay.
task ahead.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that diversity and inclusion is. I've heard a little bit about it, and I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm in the belief, yes, life ain't fair, but if you're applying for something or doing something, everybody should want the best person for a job, and that should be it, not any other factor. And we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I agree with you. You shouldn't pick a person because of his color, background, or whatever, you know, and just be fair with everybody, you know, and
Yeah, that's kind of the diversity and inclusion questions. And the second one's same thing, basically making sure all voices are heard, which you're going to do that on the city council and not because somebody's a certain ethnic group or gender that you're not going to let them talk at a city council meeting. It's whoever wants to talk, they talk, and that's the end of it. So we'll go ahead and skip on to the next subject, long-term vision. Where do you see Borger in 10 years, and what steps would you take to help the city achieve that vision?
That would be a hard question.
Like, what are you gonna do in 10? I don't know. You know, like we don't know what we're gonna do next year, much less
Well,
in
that's true.
10
I don't know what I'm
years.
going to do tomorrow.
Don't know what I'm gonna do tomorrow, much
Yeah.
less in 10 years.
I wouldn't really have a comment. There's so many pieces to the puzzle, and I mean, like I said, there's what and nothing's for certain. Since I've been here, I've seen, well, 3 plants close. I mean, I'm not saying that the refinery or Fuel Texas is going to close by no means. It'll probably be around long after we're gone. But, we had Plains Plant, CoPoly, and Northern Natural, out in Fritch. And,
Oh yes,
of course, when they close, the
it,
people move away.
it's been a
simple as that.
downsizing over the years. I mean, when I was a kid, Borger was population 21,000. Now it's
Yeah,
down to
I don't-
13,000.
Yeah, I was
Ear-
trying to,
Early 80s is what I'm thinking. Remember seeing the city limit sign.
I don't remember what the population was when I came here in '72. I know it's quite a bit bigger than it is now. I think now it's a little over 12.5, somewhere around there.
Okay, the next question. How would you encourage collaboration with other local governments or organizations to tackle regional challenges? That might be something like maybe fire departments just they're doing that between towns.
Yeah.
Something they could continue. I mean, that's kind of collaboration and different law enforcement's
Yeah.
communicating with each other. I don't know how much they communicate on the drug issues because the drugs come somewhere, and usually Amarillo is the hub, and then it gets distributed
Yeah.
from there.
But those recent wildfires we had, everybody come together. I mean, people as far as Brady, where my daughter lives, came up to Borger, and whether it be a fire department or, food trailers or stuff like that, it was all free. I mean, they didn't charge you for it, and, which was a good deal. And I think one of the better ideas they come up with is, I guess, stationing a plane out at the airport, to combat the fires, as far as, I guess you could, tanker planes, I guess.
The tanker planes coming in, and during the fires last year, they stored a lot of hay out there. A lot of people bringing in hay to the community.
Yeah.
They stored it out there, and
Oh yeah, there was a lot of people coming together, and not only our community, but like I said, as far down south as Brady and all over that came, which was pretty impressive. I figured we was on our own, but
usually in national disaster, people want to reach out and help.
yeah,
My mom's house almost burned down out there at Scotts Acres last year, and telling in another interview, a neighbor day before just wanted an ice chest for his beer. The next day he had 5 of them.
really.
Everybody, we took care of them people in Stinnett, and I stayed out of the Borger, I stayed out of the Fritch. I had enough going on. They had enough going on in Fritch it was times 5 of disaster over there in Fritch, and then Borger, the dome was the hub for donations coming in from everywhere and different things. So just tried to stay out of that. Okay, how would you ensure that the decisions as a council member are transparent and in the best interest of all Borger residents? Now, them council meetings, aren't they Facebook Live?
Yeah,
think
they're
they
live.
are.
They're
That's-
also
that's-
open meetings. What I'd like to see on that is, I know they probably already asked questions, before the meeting starts, in their work sessions and stuff like that. But I'd like to see them ask some questions, when it's live, pertinent questions, and kind of kind of give the community an idea of what they're, what they're doing. I mean, more or less sometimes it leaves people in the dark, and they go in there and come back and, and then they vote on it. It's, well, they saying, what was that all about? So I think if they'd ask pertinent questions, like I said, is, for the community's sake, or the viewer's sake, I should say, because evidently, they probably already know, and probably already asked those questions, during their work session, but like I said, it would give the community or the people watching, a better idea of what's going on.
And some of these questions, I know looks like they're aimed at if you were already on the city council. Some of these, they're kind of hard. It's like, what would you do if you're doing this or that?